page 110. They did not hear the call. Earth human being, pay attention to the signs of the time and replace your earthly material pseudo-values with the spiritual, existential values of the truth. The earth human being, however, also deliberately overlooked the admonition of the time that all worldly material things are subject to the law of the passingness and are destined to the inevitable demise. But now, may the earth human being finally elevate his or her senses to the truth and recognize that the true values are solely and exclusively to be found in the eternal values of the creation. Indeed, many earth human beings have already comprehended this truth in partial values, but from the material boundedness of their thinking, the unreal conclusion has been drawn that they can now, by means of their partial understanding, still savor the life, with all its worldly material pseudo-values, joys, passions, vices, and desires, etc. As a result, the egoism has grown into an immense might in the humankind, so that all understanding amongst it and within it has become impossible. This selfishness has gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature into a farce, and not least because many human beings have partly recognized that they are enslaved and exploited by the state and religions. It is therefore still incomprehensible if the closest conclusion was that the human being as an individual can be just as selfish and exploitative as the state, the very state, and religion, and that the earth human being, as an individual being in the mass of humankind, has comprehended this very quickly, is proven by the maliciously crass application of the egoism by which they are ruled today. Indeed, the masses of the earth human beings, as well as religions and politics, speak of a sense of community and of the well-being of the peoples, in complete concord, equality, and love for the next one, but without serious intentions and backgrounds. The talk is hollow and empty, nothing more than shallow and vain prattle. For the phraseful speeches serve only the purpose of the propaganda in order to fool the people and secure their votes in the next elections. Honesty is not valued in these things on the earth, but on the other hand, the earth humankind is lacking also in the courage for the honesty and truth, and with this they condemn themselves and dig their own grave. But those who in honesty proclaim the truth are accused by the human beings of lying and dismissed as fantasists. Their necessarily harsh and unpolished words, which are objected to by many uncomprehending ones, are made into reproaches and stigmatizations by them. But woe to those who slander, for they have grasped the sword on the wrong end, on the blade, and will have to pay for their unattentiveness and their over-courage with painful wounds. May the earth human beings, many earth human beings, will say to what has been explained so far, yes, yes, all this has its rightness, but what should we do against this? But how often has this question already been raised by human beings, and how often have good and honest truth proclaimers already given them answers and instructions? Useless, however, because again and again the human beings have fallen back into their old life paths because to them the truth was too hard, and the way to the truth was too bitter and too long-winded. Nevertheless, however, the teaching should be given once again, because the evolution of the new time requires it. So may the earth human beings listen and grasp the truth in its deepest sense. Religion, in its application, is a human thought-up, all-destructive, and deadly product, because this irrational teaching forces this thinking life form to seek a connection and a justification for existence in a dependency of the past, to create a dependency on any illusory facts, and to destroy the self-rule and the self-existence. So therefore, if the earth human beings think and act religiously, back-connecting and back-searching, they inevitably fall into a dependency on the power they created, whereby they readily forfeit their autonomy. That is to say, if the earth human beings think and act religiously, then they fall for the erroneous view and irrational teaching that outside of their existence they also owe all their knowledge and ability, their wisdom and their love, etc. to God. From this results the inevitable irrational teaching that the creation has already given these facts to the human being during the creation of his or her spirit, and that he or she, by a falling away from the creation through guilt and sin, has forced these into oblivion. But this means a very evil irrational teaching, for it displaces the truth to an extent which has no more greater possibilities. Everything that is becoming, or emerging, coming into being, is arranged into the same and equal creational laws and recommendations, from which the effective brazen regulation results. This implies that the spirit and the material body must also observe this regulation in the following of the laws and recommendations. Their becoming occurs according to the same creational values. So with regard to the creation of the spirit, the procreation of the human being by human beings can be used as an example, through which even the most uncomprehending earth human being is able to recognize the logic. When a descendant is procreated by earth human beings or any other life forms, then this occurs through a union of two onenesses, which are in themselves autonomous, which combine into a whole, or into a hyper-oneness. In the moment of the union, the actual life is first created. Once this has occurred, the newly conceived life must begin to develop within itself in the sense that it learns and brings into development its basic character through certain laws and recommendations. The newly conceived life thus forms itself within the laws and recommendations of the brazen regulation. Now, as this example serves for the material life, so it also is in line with the creation of the spirit. When a new spirit is created by the union of two different onenesses, which are in themselves autonomous, the new spirit then integrates itself into the creational regulation. That is to say, it internalizes the creational recommendations and laws according to which it will then fulfill its existence. These assimilated laws and recommendations confirm, within the spirit, the fact that it was created to learn and to evolve itself, in order to relatively absolutely fulfill itself, and thereby to further evolve the creation itself. These laws and recommendations contain only the knowledge that the evolution must be observed, but no other knowledge and ability, because still fully inexperienced, it must first gather values of the knowledge and ability through the learning. So therefore the creation does not give to the new spirit any knowledge and ability at all, except the knowledge of the laws and recommendations. For how could the creation relatively absolutely fulfill itself if it were to indulge itself in the knowledge and ability that it already possesses? It would thereby destroy itself. When the descendant conceived in the human being, or in any life form, forms its basic character, then this equals the recognition of the laws and recommendations which the new spirit gathers within itself. After the birth of the material life form, it then evolves according to the external influences and the teachings of all kinds brought to it. Therefore, it evolves itself. So likewise, for the new spirit, it learns and evolves. It gathers knowledge, ability, and wisdom. But if it had already received this knowledge and ability during its creation by the creation, then the learning would be superfluous. Serving as an example again is the human life form. If at the time of his or her conception, the necessary knowledge and ability were already implanted into the human being, then he or she would no longer be in a position to evolve. All knowledge and ability, etc., would be anchored in him or her, and all teachings would be superfluous. So therefore, if likewise the new spirit were to be endowed with all knowledge and ability during its creation, all learning would be superfluous for it, and no evolution could take place. Just as the human being therefore adopts the life character after his or her birth, so the spirit also works out its knowledge and ability. There is now, however, the irrational teaching in the humankind of the earth, that within the spirit all knowledge and ability already exist, that have fallen into oblivion through guilt and sin, and through a falling away from the creation and its laws and recommendations. It should therefore be said to the irrational believers and irrational teachers of this insanity that guilt and sin and the resulting atonement represent a product of material life form regulation. Any teaching, also that of the life and of the spirit, can only be fruitful if the concerning life form commits errors, which lead to the cognition. According to creational wise law, it is therefore required that every life form commits errors, burdens itself with guilt and sin. As this is inherent in your language, the committing of these errors, however, in turn requires that the life form, depending on its time, recognizes that which is false from the errors committed, works them out, and comes to the knowledge that these errors no longer have to be committed and must therefore be processed into the positive equalizedness. So therefore, likewise, the human being can only learn and evolve if he or she commits errors, which he or she then perceives, recognizes, and can process into the positive equalizedness. Guilt and sin thus become obsolete and fall into the realm of human unlogic. For how could the learning one be befallen by punishment for errors committed if he or she must commit errors through the determination of the creational laws and recommendations unavoidably for the purpose of the learning? It would be something unlogical, a paradox beyond compare, when the most precise following of a law would be punished. It would amount in every form to this: so amongst you earth human beings, the law of human making exists that stealing is punishable, and a human being follows this law very accurately and therefore does not commit theft, that he or she would then be punished for it. From these human irrational teachings, that the committing of errors, which after all is given according to creational values through laws and recommendations, is punishable and is subject to an atonement, the incomprehensible and unlogical views have also arisen, which the earth human being calls karma. This so-called karma, likewise, is a malicious, irrational teaching beyond compare, is likewise a fantasy product of human thought, which cannot be reconciled with the truth and reality. Fully and absolutely unlogical in its deepest substances, it is an invention of religiously thinking human beings, created for the purpose of instilling anxiety and making human life forms dependent on might-greedy and exploitative leaders of the people in political and religious respects. The forms referred by you, Earth human beings, which you call karma, are just as unrealistic and unreal as your widespread assertion that God, gods, and tin gods are the creation itself. May the Earth human being who has fallen prey to the irrational teachings of the religion push this evil, terrible thing away and recognize the truth. Religion founders and know-it-alls, charlatans, deceivers, and might-greedy leading classes are responsible for the all-prevalent and prevailing irrational teachings. These irrational teachings are the fundamental facts of all false thinking and deeds based on templates in the sense of patterns, pattern knowledge, imitation, formulas, etc. They are the deep grounding roots of all unknowledgeness and untruth, and the Earth human being must tear them out and destroy them. If he or she does not tackle this and does not carry it out, he or she will continue to further live according to the time immemorial irrational teachings and sink into the abyss. All the wisdom achieved in the course of the innumerable lives, the acquired knowledge, and the ability of the spirit in the human being have not simply been lost or destroyed. Without exception, everything has been preserved, without a gap, up to the present time. All knowledge and abilities, therefore, have since time immemorial been passed on to the present time, because innumerable spirit forms have learned, worked out, and retained everything. If this is not clear to the Earth human beings in their form, however, then they are not able to evolve further. This knowledge and ability, which were acquired and gathered over millions of years, can never be destroyed any more and always remain permanent. It is only necessary to again put it together and join it together in a religion process. So that is to say, religion can never be used for the evolution, according to your current understanding, but rather solely religion. The truth, the wisdom, the abilities, the knowledge, and the love, etc., must be put together and joined together again from what currently exists in material consciousness, in order, then, through a consciousness expansion, to experience a further development. A religion-based form, however, namely a back-connectedness, already lets the religion be destroyed in its fundamental substance and never find fertile soil. A religion-based form alone is able to bring profound success, but never religion-based forms. From the form of the religion emerges effective knowledge, from which the wisdom and the ability result again. These then further guarantee that the way of the evolution can be pursued, and indeed in both forms. Evolution does not only mean a development of already existing capabilities and other things, as the Earth human being has unfortunately been oriented by confusions and irrational teachings, but it also means that new facts and actualities are learned, recognized, processed, and evaluated. This is the actual form of the learning, thus evolution. The evolution-based form of the spirit is this. When the spirit lives in a material body, then this is the time of the learning and gathering of impressions and facts. Only in the material body does it have a learning-based constancy on a material world. According to its immaterial form and immaterial possibility of existence, it lives as an immaterial life form for a certain time in a material body, during which it learns and gathers takes in cognitions, processes lessons, and brings in new values. As an immaterial life form in a material body, however, it is not able to process everything gathered at rest, and according to given laws, because the material existential question outweighs the main values of the material existence. Consequently, therefore, a way had to be created by the creation which brings about an appropriate equalization. This way is the form of the death, of the transition into a plane of immaterial existence. That means the spirit leaves the material body after its time and steps over into the pure spiritual existence. The earth human being says that the body dies and lapses into the death, whereas the spirit enters its otherworldly plane. As a pure spirit form, the spirit further leads its existence in the otherworldly realm of all that which is material. There, it processes all cognitions, etc., which it has gathered in the material life of the body. It evaluates them and gathers within itself the results as knowledge and ability, as wisdom, truth, and love, etc. According to its spiritual level, it stays for a longer or shorter time in the otherworldly realm, in order to then, after a given time, appear again as an immaterial life form in a body. The knowledge and the abilities, etc., gathered in the otherworldly realm are deeply anchored in the spirit and not easily recognizable by the material life form. This has its distinct law in that the material life form would not further strive for the evolution if it were conscious of all the capabilities of the spirit. So therefore, if they are deeply anchored and hidden in it, it must always seek new ways in order to evolve. It therefore continues to improve itself, learns, and recognizes, and relatively absolutely fulfills itself more and more. Step by step, it is also able to retrieve the already existing knowledge and abilities that are stored deep within it, and to process them together with the new cognizance into new values. But this existing knowledge can only then be retrieved from the subconscious when the newly acquired knowledge requires the already stored knowledge and becomes necessary for it. That is to say, when the new knowledge can be acquired in cooperation with the already stored knowledge. Here and there, through the human behavior, disturbances also appear, from which results that, through storage bank connections of subconscious form, capabilities from stored knowledge and abilities of former lives come to the surface in human beings, which they are still incapable of using according to knowledge, conscience, and truth. In most cases, they become conscious of these capabilities, but do not know their truth. Through irrational teachings, they ascribe these capabilities to a higher power, to a godly being, or similar forms, in absolute unknowledge of the fact that these concern their very own and in former times acquired capabilities and consciousness-based powers of their former personalities. They are not able to analyze the truth because due to the irrational teachings that control them, they are lacking of all truth. From this, it also results that innumerable belief and religious directions were able to gain admission into the human mode of thinking, and that the ways and forms of the creation and of the spirit were falsified into very complicated, irrational teachings.